hopeful people. Today I want to speak about something that has been experienced a certain renaissance, and this is the topic about psychedelic substances. Now, a lot of teachers in Eastern traditions, for example, in Buddhistic traditions or Hindu traditions, do not have experience with psychedelic substances. But in the West, there's more of an experience with psychedelic substances. And of course, there was a lot of research done in the 60s and 70s, for example, by the Harvard psychologist Timothy Leary and by his friend Richard Alpert, who was later known as the great spiritual teacher Ram Dass. Now, there is a resurgence in psychedelic research. And not only that, there are many people in the West who want to explore psychedelics and, for example, travel to South America, to Brazil or Colombia to meet a shaman from a traditional background where they have the ability to go through a psychedelic ceremony. Now, psychedelics are not to be taken lightly. The reason I say this is because they work. They have very profound effects, and these effects are nearly instantaneous. After ingesting a psychedelic, after half an hour or 40 minutes, the experience arises, and the experience is powerful. Now, there are reasons to seek a psychedelic experience. And there's also a reason why people after having a psychedelic experience become more spiritual. Because the psychedelic dislodges your nervous system and your brain from its default state. It gets rid of the restriction. It temporarily suspends the conditioning, the programming that you have been subjected to in this life, which has created your identity, your ego, based on the beliefs this conditioning has created. So you can go beyond that. You can go beyond the thought matrix that keeps you trapped in the mind. This can lead to past life experiences, multidimensional experiences, experience of telepathy, experience of meeting other entities. Now, a lot of people who have not had these experiences will be doubtful when I say that. And I will say, well, of course, you can hold on to your skepticism. And that is healthy, because if someone just tells you something and you believe it, you create a story in the mind, a narrative, and you've just replaced an older narrative with a new narrative. All narratives are just an abstraction. They are not reality. So if you do not have experiences like that yourself, do not believe a single thing I say. But I would encourage you to be curious, to seek direct inquiry with limitless curiosity. Now, when we make those experiences, from that moment on, what we perceive as reality is, how can I say this? Well, our previous construct of reality cannot survive that experience. And of course, then we're challenged because the identity, the ego, the person that we have been holding on to, our own personal narrative in the mind, is just a very limited layer of perception of what we call reality. When we have transcended that layer, spiritual curiosity arises. And spiritual curiosity means wanting to experience knowledge of self. Religion, mystical experience, philosophy, science ultimately is about self-knowledge. Finding the mind that creates the machine. Now, for many who struggle with having a meditation regimen, for many who struggle to, over years, for example, meditate daily, psychedelics are a possibility. They are a possibility because they open that gateway instantaneously. But they do not leave you with a continuous transformation. This gateway opens temporarily, and after that, this super complex experience that your brain can not comprehend at all. You can comprehend it, your brain cannot. But after you left that experience, your brain will encode it into memory. So it will create a reduced depiction, an abstraction, a narrative of that experience, and you just left with memory. And this memory is highly inaccurate. So while on a psychedelic experience, which is a mystical experience, if you're in a state of knowing, after you leave that experience, the state of knowing cannot be carried over. It will be fragmented, and the ego can attack it. The ego will tell you, have I imagined this? Wasn't that a dream? Wasn't it this? Yeah? The ego wants to control it, label it, put it into a box so it's not intimidated by it, so it's not challenged by it. But something in you will know that what you experienced is profound. And when others who did not make that experience ask you, well, isn't this like a dream state? Then they haven't a clue, because when you experience psychedelic trips, that on a certain dose, the experiences become so complex that you're very, very aware that the brain has not the computing power to produce this experience. The brain is incapable of doing this. When you're in a dream state, you can be awakened in the dream state. You realize, well, I'm dreaming. I can manipulate my environment, so on and so forth. But you understand that a lot of times dream states are not very precise. They have a huge complexity, but even their complexity is limited. So dream states are the only alternative mind states that people who do not have mystical or psychedelic experiences know. So since this is the only different mind state they know, they relate it to dreams or daydreams or hallucinations. It is true that on psychedelics you can hallucinate to a certain degree. But depending on the dosage and what substance you use, at a certain level, you go beyond hallucinations. The ego loses its grip completely, and it cannot produce the narrative anymore. This is significant. Now, I will not advocate for replacing meditation with psychedelics. I do not think that psychedelics can actually have these long-term effects that we deep down desire. Psychedelics open you up to the realization of what is out there, and what is out there is infinite. So once you realize that and you find yourself suspended from your ego, you have transcended the ego, you feel a form of liberation, then the desire to make this continuous arises. But you cannot make this continuous through a continuous psychedelic drug use. This is not advisable. This is not healthy. A few sessions can be helpful, with huge distance between them, to contemplate about them, to reflect upon them, and to learn to integrate that knowledge into your awareness. But transformation ultimately is achieved through meditation. While the psychedelic gives you temporary access to deeper mind states, meditation can give you continuous access to deeper mind states, because through meditation you start modifying the body long term. So transformation is a possibility. The good things about psychedelic experiences is that they can create the motivation within you and the determination to bring that transformation about. And suddenly an interest in meditation and in certain mystical exercises arises. In that sense, they can be a catalyst for transformation. But the transformation that we deep down desire is one that we can bring about ourselves through meditation. Meditation practitioners themselves drastically benefit from psychedelic experiences. Because a meditation practitioner that is able to go beyond the story already, that is able to let go of thoughts, of fears, of anxieties, of fantasies, daydreams, a meditation practitioner that is able to find the consciousness in which all these experiences arises is someone who is able to give up control. And the part of us that wants to control is the egoic mind. When we can release this, we go into a psychedelic experience without resisting it. So as such, there is no suffering. If you are a very rigid thinker, very reductionist, very scientific oriented, maybe identify as an atheist, if you go into a psychedelic experience, it will, in a sense, suspend everything you believe you know. This can create tremendous resistance in you, and the identity that you want to hold on to becomes terrified. So as such, I recommend meditation practices before engaging with psychedelics. And after a certain level of meditative ability, psychedelics themselves are not necessary anymore because certain states are accessible through meditation. Now, for those who deal with psychological issues, if you experience depression, for example, small dose of psychedelics can be helpful in recovering from depression. There have been great studies about this, especially about psilocybin. But people who deal with dissociative disorders, people who have profound trauma within them, I want to make it clear that the psychedelic experience, like for example a hypnosis or other forms of accessing deeper layers of consciousness, can reveal the trauma. I will not recommend for everyone who has had traumatic experience in this lifetime to go through a psychedelic experience without professional guidance, without therapists or spiritual teachers or shamans who have done this for a very, very long time, that know what they're dealing with to guide you through the process. And of course, in a country, state, or nation where this is legal. For those who do not deal with profound trauma in this life, a psychedelic experience can be the gate opener that you're looking for. Now, that being said, be wise about it. This is not something that you do for fun. This is something for self-discovery. And ultimately, all religious or mystical experience is self-discovery, because we are all self. So, in order to go into self-discovery, the identity that you hold on to needs to die. And this is a very strong word. But even meditation is a conscious attempt at dying. It is an attempt to go beyond the identity, to suspend the identity, to find the consciousness beyond it, and as such come to the realization that death is not a fact. Death only affects a small part of us. And this is our current expression in this physical vehicle. I think this is a lot of information to process, to contemplate about it. I encourage you to be your own expert, to read about it, to educate yourself. And for those who are interested in doing a psychedelic session, do this with experienced people in a safe environment. No distraction. Meditation before entering the experience. Reflecting after the experience. Do this with people who respect it, who do understand what this experience can lead to, that create an atmosphere in which the mood swings that can occur are limited. Create yourself with a surrounding that can ground you during and after the experience. Contemplate about that. Be well.